Picture this scenario. You're 25 years old, sitting across from your bank advisor, and they start throwing around terms like compound interest, credit utilization ratios, and asset allocation. Your palms get sweaty, your brain shuts down, and you nod along, pretending you understand, while secretly wondering why nobody ever explained this stuff when it actually mattered. Sound familiar? Well, here's the kicker that's going to make you absolutely furious. Every single concept they're discussing could have been taught to a middle schooler, but somehow our education system decided that memorizing the capitals of countries you'll never visit was more important than understanding the financial decisions that will literally determine the quality of your entire life. You know what really drives me crazy? We live in a world where you can graduate with honors, earn multiple degrees, and still have absolutely no clue how to manage the one thing that affects every decision you make every single day: money. Meanwhile, that kid who barely scraped through high school but learned about investing from his uncle is quietly building wealth while you're stressed about your credit card balance and wondering if you'll ever afford a house. My name is Alex, and I've spent years studying why some people seem to effortlessly build wealth while others with identical incomes struggle paycheck to paycheck their entire lives. What I discovered is that it has nothing to do with luck, family connections, or even how much you earn. The difference is financial literacy. And today, I'm going to teach you everything the school system should have covered but completely ignored. If you've ever felt overwhelmed by financial jargon, frustrated by conflicting money advice, or stressed about your financial future, make sure you stick around because we're about to change that forever. Hit that subscribe button if you're ready to finally understand money, and give this video a thumbs up if you think financial education should be mandatory in schools. Trust me, your future self will thank you for the next 50 minutes. Here's something that's going to blow your mind. According to recent studies, only about half of American adults can correctly answer basic financial literacy questions. That means if you're in a room with 10 people, 5 of them are making financial decisions based on complete guesswork. We're talking about people who can calculate complex mathematical equations, but can't figure out how credit card interest actually works. It's like teaching someone to perform brain surgery, but never explaining what a scalpel does. But here's what makes this even more insane. The average person will earn over $2 million during their working lifetime. $2 million. That's more money than most people can even visualize, yet we send them into the world with zero training on how to manage it effectively. Would you hand someone the keys to a Ferrari without teaching them how to drive? Of course not. But that's exactly what we do with people's financial lives every single day. The consequences of this financial ignorance are absolutely devastating. People are drowning in debt they don't understand, missing out on investment opportunities that could change their lives, and making purchasing decisions that seem smart in the moment but destroy their long-term wealth-building potential. Meanwhile, the financially literate minority is quietly accumulating assets, building passive income streams, and creating the kind of financial security that most people think is reserved for lottery winners. Let me tell you something that might make you uncomfortable, but it's absolutely crucial that you understand this. Your current financial situation isn't entirely your fault. You weren't given the tools to succeed. But from this moment forward, your financial future is completely in your hands. The information gap that's been holding you back is about to disappear forever. We're going to start with something that sounds boring, but is actually the foundation of every smart financial decision you'll ever make. Understanding exactly where you stand right now. Most people have absolutely no idea what their true financial picture looks like, and that's like trying to navigate to a destination without knowing your starting point. Your financial position can be broken down into 3 critical numbers that reveal everything about your current situation. These numbers will tell you whether you're moving forward or backward financially, how vulnerable you are to unexpected expenses, and exactly what steps you need to take to improve your situation. The first number is your net worth, and this is probably the most important financial metric that nobody talks about. Net worth is simply everything you own minus everything you owe. It's your true financial score, and it tells a much more accurate story than your income ever could. You might know someone who earns 6 figures but has a negative net worth because they owe more than they own. Meanwhile, that teacher earning $40,000 a year might have a higher net worth because they understand how to build assets instead of accumulating liabilities. Here's how you calculate your net worth, and I want you to actually do this while we're talking. Grab your phone and open up your calculator app. We're going to add up everything you own that has real value. Your checking account balance, savings account, any retirement accounts, the current value of your car, your home if you own one, and any other valuable assets you might have. Don't include your wardrobe or your collection of vintage action figures unless they're actually worth significant money. Now subtract everything you owe: credit card balances, student loans, car payments, mortgage debt, and any other money you've borrowed. The number you're left with is your net worth. This number might be positive, negative, or somewhere close to zero. Whatever it is, don't panic. This is simply your starting point, and every wealthy person started somewhere. The second critical number is your monthly cash flow, which reveals whether you're actually moving forward financially or just spinning your wheels. Cash flow is your total monthly income minus your total monthly expenses. This number tells you whether you're building wealth, treading water, or slowly sinking into deeper financial trouble. Most people think they have a general idea of their cash flow, but when they actually track every dollar for a full month, they're shocked by what they discover. Those small subscriptions you forgot about, the convenience purchases that seem harmless individually, and the lifestyle expenses that have gradually increased over time all add up to much more than most people realize. If your cash flow is positive, congratulations. You have surplus money that can be directed toward building wealth. If it's negative, you're spending more than you earn, which explains why your credit card balances keep growing despite your best intentions. And if it's exactly zero, you're living paycheck to paycheck with no buffer for emergencies or opportunities. The third number is what I call your financial runway, and this might be the most psychologically important number of all. Your financial runway is how long you could survive if your income disappeared tomorrow. Take your monthly expenses and divide them into your liquid savings. Liquid savings means money you can access quickly without penalties, so your checking account, regular savings account, and maybe money market accounts count, but your retirement accounts don't. If your monthly expenses are $3,000 and you have $9,000 in accessible savings, your financial runway is 3 months. This number directly impacts your stress levels, your decision-making confidence, and your ability to take advantage of opportunities when they arise. Now here's what's fascinating about these three numbers. They tell completely different stories depending on your situation. Maybe your net worth looks decent because you own a home, but your cash flow is tight and your runway is practically non-existent. Or maybe your net worth is negative because of student loans, but your cash flow is strong and improving every month. Each scenario requires a completely different strategy. Understanding these numbers also reveals why so many people feel confused about their financial progress. They might be earning more money than ever before, but if their expenses have increased at the same rate, their actual financial position hasn't improved at all. Or they might feel poor because they don't have expensive toys, but they're actually building substantial wealth through consistent saving and investing. This brings us to something that's going to completely change how you think about money and success. The difference between looking wealthy and being wealthy. These are not the same thing, and confusing them is one of the biggest financial mistakes you can make. Looking wealthy means having expensive cars, designer clothes, the latest gadgets, and a lifestyle that impresses other people. Being wealthy means owning assets that generate income, having financial security that lets you sleep peacefully at night, and building the kind of net worth that creates real options in your life. The person driving the brand new luxury SUV with the massive monthly payment might look successful, but they could be drowning in debt and living paycheck to paycheck. Meanwhile, the person driving the reliable 10-year-old car might be quietly accumulating investment accounts that will fund their early retirement. This distinction is crucial because our culture constantly bombards us with messages that equate consumption with success. Social media makes it seem like everyone else is living lavish lifestyles while you're stuck being responsible with your money. But what you're not seeing are the credit card statements, the stress levels, and the complete lack of financial security that often hide behind those impressive-looking lifestyles. Here's something that might shock you about wealth building. Most millionaires are not the flashy, luxury-obsessed people you see in movies. They're ordinary people who understood the power of living below their means and investing the difference consistently over time. They drive modest cars, live in reasonable homes, and focus on building assets instead of impressing neighbors they probably don't even like. This mindset shift from consumption to accumulation is probably the most important mental transition you can make when it comes to building wealth. Every dollar you spend on things that lose value is a dollar that can't be invested to grow your net worth. Every monthly payment you commit to is money that can't work for your future self. But here's where most financial advice gets it completely wrong. I'm not suggesting you should live like a monk and deprive yourself of everything enjoyable. That's not sustainable, and it's not necessary. What I'm suggesting is that you become intentional about your spending instead of unconscious about it. When you understand the true cost of purchases, you start making different decisions. That $700 monthly car payment doesn't just cost you $700. It costs you the investment returns you could have earned on that money over the years you're making payments. When you calculate the opportunity cost, that car payment could represent hundreds of thousands of dollars in lost wealth over your lifetime. This doesn't mean you should never buy anything nice or that you should feel guilty about every purchase. It means you should understand the trade-offs you're making and choose consciously rather than automatically. Maybe that expensive car is worth the opportunity cost because you genuinely love driving and it brings you real joy. But maybe it's not, and you'd rather have the financial security that comes from investing that money instead. The key is making these decisions based on your actual values and long-term goals rather than external pressure or unconscious habits. When you're clear about what you truly want from your life, the financial decisions that support those goals become much easier to make. Now that you understand where you stand and how to think about money differently, we need to talk about setting financial goals that actually matter. Most people approach goal setting completely backwards, and that's why they never make the progress they're hoping for. The typical approach to financial goal setting is to pick some arbitrary number out of thin air and call it a day. I want to save $10,000. I want to be debt-free. I want to have $1 million by retirement. These aren't goals, they're wishes with price tags attached. And wishes don't create the kind of sustained motivation you need to completely transform your financial life. Real financial goals start with your actual life goals, not random dollar amounts that sound impressive. What do you want your life to look like? Do you want the security of knowing that an unexpected expense won't destroy your entire month? Do you want the freedom to walk away from a toxic job without worrying about paying rent? Do you want to start a business, travel the world, or retire before you're too old to enjoy it? Once you're crystal clear about what you actually want from life, you can reverse engineer the financial requirements to make it happen. Want job flexibility? You'll need a larger emergency fund and lower fixed expenses. Want to start a business? You'll need startup capital and enough savings to survive while your income is unpredictable. Want to retire early? You'll need a serious wealth-building strategy that goes way beyond hoping your company retirement plan will somehow be enough. Here's what separates people who achieve their financial goals from those who don't. Successful people create specific, measurable targets with realistic deadlines. Unsuccessful people create vague hopes with no accountability. Instead of saying you want to save more money, try this. I want to save $15,000 for a house down payment within the next 18 months. That's a goal you can actually track and plan for. But here's where most people completely sabotage themselves before they even start. They set goals that sound amazing, but are mathematically impossible given their current situation. If your monthly surplus is $200, don't set a goal to save $30,000 in 1 year. The math doesn't work. You'll get frustrated, feel like a failure, and probably give up after a few months. Better to set a goal you can actually achieve and build momentum than to set an impossible target and quit when reality hits. Your goals should stretch you without breaking you. They should require some sacrifice and discipline, but they shouldn't require you to completely transform your entire lifestyle overnight. Smart goal setting also means having different time horizons for different objectives. Short-term goals are things you want to accomplish within the next year, maybe building a small emergency fund or paying off a credit card. Medium-term goals might take 2 to 5 years, like saving for a house down payment or eliminating student loans. Long-term goals are the big ones that might take decades, like retirement or achieving complete financial independence. The beautiful thing about having goals with different timelines is that you can make progress on multiple fronts simultaneously. Maybe you're putting $50 per month toward your emergency fund, $200 toward paying off debt, and $100 toward your house down payment savings. Each goal feeds into the others, and as you accomplish the shorter-term objectives, you can redirect that money toward bigger targets. This brings us to something that makes most people want to run screaming from the room, but I promise we're going to make this painless and actually useful. We need to talk about budgeting, but forget everything you think you know about budgets because we're not going to create some complicated spreadsheet that tracks every penny and makes you feel guilty about buying coffee. A good budget isn't about restriction and deprivation. It's about permission and intentionality. You're giving yourself permission to spend money on things you value while making sure you're not accidentally sabotaging your future. Think of it as a spending plan rather than a restriction plan. You're not trying to minimize every expense. You're trying to maximize the value you get from every dollar. The best budget is one you can actually stick to for months and years, not one that looks perfect on paper but falls apart after 2 weeks. Most budgets fail because they're either too complicated, too restrictive, or completely disconnected from how people actually live their lives. Let me share 3 budgeting approaches that actually work for real people with real lives. The first is the 50-30-20 rule, which is perfect for people who want simplicity without tracking every transaction. 50% of your after-tax income goes toward needs like housing, transportation, and groceries. 30% goes toward wants like entertainment, dining out, and hobbies. 20% goes toward savings and debt repayment. This approach works because it's flexible enough to accommodate different lifestyles while ensuring you're making progress toward your goals. You don't need to categorize every expense or feel guilty about spending money on things you enjoy. The second approach is zero-based budgeting, where you assign every dollar a job before you spend it. Your income minus your planned expenses should equal zero, not because you're spending everything, but because every dollar is allocated to either current needs or future goals. This method works well for people who like control and want to maximize their money's efficiency. The third approach is the envelope method, which is incredibly effective for people who struggle with overspending. You put cash into different envelopes for various spending categories. When the envelope is empty, you're done spending in that category for the month. This makes spending tangible and creates natural limits that are much harder to ignore than numbers on a screen. Regardless of which approach you choose, your budget needs to account for irregular expenses that happen throughout the year. Things like car maintenance, holiday gifts, annual subscriptions, and medical expenses. Most people forget about these costs, then wonder why they can never stick to their budget when these predictable but irregular expenses pop up. Set aside money each month for these irregular expenses so they don't derail your entire financial plan. If you know you'll spend about $1,200 on holiday gifts each year, put aside $100 per month in a separate savings account. When December rolls around, you're prepared instead of panicked. Your budget also needs to include some flexibility for fun and spontaneous spending. A budget that doesn't allow for any enjoyment is a budget that won't survive contact with real life. Build in money for entertainment, dining out, hobbies, or whatever brings you genuine happiness. The key is being intentional about this spending, rather than letting it happen accidentally. Here's what separates a good budget from a great one. A great budget evolves with your life and gets easier to maintain over time, not harder. Start simple, track your results, and adjust as needed. If you budgeted $300 for groceries but consistently spend $400, either find ways to reduce your grocery spending or adjust your budget to reflect reality. Fighting against your natural spending patterns is exhausting and ultimately pointless. The goal isn't to create a perfect budget that looks impressive on paper. The goal is to create a sustainable system that helps you spend intentionally while making consistent progress toward your financial objectives. Now we need to address something that's probably causing you more stress than you realize, even if you're not consciously thinking about it. Emergency preparedness, not the kind where you're stockpiling canned goods for the apocalypse, but the financial kind that protects you when life inevitably throws you a curveball. An emergency fund is money set aside specifically for genuine emergencies. Not for that amazing sale at your favorite store, not for a spontaneous vacation that you'll definitely regret on Monday morning, but for real emergencies that could otherwise force you into debt or financial disaster. The traditional advice says you need 3 to 6 months of expenses saved in your emergency fund. But let's be realistic about what that actually means for most people. If your monthly expenses are $4,000, we're talking about $12,000 to $24,000 sitting in an account earning almost nothing except peace of mind. For someone living paycheck to paycheck, that might as well be $1 million. But here's the thing about emergency funds that most people don't understand. Having no emergency fund is like driving without insurance. Sure, you might be fine for years, but when something goes wrong, it goes really wrong. Your car breaks down and needs major repairs. You face an unexpected medical bill that insurance doesn't cover. Your employer decides they don't need you anymore. Your landlord sells the building and you need to find a new place with first month's rent, security deposit, and moving expenses. Without an emergency fund, these situations force you into debt that can take years to recover from. But here's how you build an emergency fund when you can barely make ends meet. Start small and be strategic about it. Even $25 per week adds up to over $1,300 in a year. That might not cover 6 months of expenses, but it'll handle most minor emergencies without forcing you into debt. The key is treating your emergency fund contribution like a bill that must be paid, not like leftover money you'll save if there's anything remaining at the end of the month. Because let's be honest, there's never anything remaining at the end of the month unless you make it happen intentionally. Automate your emergency fund contributions so you don't have to rely on willpower or remember to transfer money manually. Set up an automatic transfer from your checking account to your savings account every payday. Start with whatever amount won't cause you to overdraft, even if that's only $10 per week initially. As your emergency fund grows, you'll notice something interesting happens psychologically. Having even a small financial cushion reduces stress and makes you feel more confident about your financial decisions. You're not constantly worried about what happens if something goes wrong, because you know you have at least some protection. Where should you keep this emergency fund? This is where a lot of people make costly mistakes. Your emergency fund should be easily accessible when you need it, but not so accessible that you'll spend it on non-emergencies. This means it shouldn't be in your checking account where it's mixed with your regular spending money, and it definitely shouldn't be invested in the stock market where its value could drop right when you need the cash most. High-yield savings accounts are usually the perfect solution for emergency funds. These accounts typically earn significantly more interest than regular savings accounts while still providing easy access to your money when you need it. Online banks often offer the highest rates because they have lower overhead costs than traditional banks. Here's something most people don't consider when building their emergency fund. The size of your emergency fund should reflect your specific situation, not some generic rule you read online. If you have a stable job with good benefits and a working spouse, you might be fine with 3 months of expenses. If you're self-employed with irregular income, have health issues, or work in an industry known for layoffs, you probably need closer to 6 months or even more. Your emergency fund should also grow as your expenses increase. If you get married, buy a house, have children, or take on other financial responsibilities, your emergency fund needs to increase accordingly. The fund that protected you when you were single and renting a studio apartment won't be adequate when you're supporting a family and paying a mortgage. Once you've built a solid emergency fund, you can start thinking about other types of savings that require different strategies. Short-term savings goals like a vacation next year or a new laptop in 6 months can stay in high-yield savings accounts because you'll need the money relatively soon. Medium-term goals like a house down payment in 3 to 5 years might benefit from conservative investment options that offer higher potential returns while still protecting your principal. But before we get into investing strategies, we need to talk about the elephant in the room that's probably costing you more money than you realize: debt. Because if you're carrying high-interest debt while trying to save money, you're essentially trying to fill a bucket with a giant hole in the bottom. The mathematics of debt are absolutely brutal, and most people have no idea just how devastating high-interest debt can be to their wealth-building potential. Let me put this in perspective with some numbers that are going to make your jaw drop. If you have $5,000 in credit card debt at 22% interest and you only make minimum payments, you'll end up paying over $15,000 total, and it'll take you more than 30 years to pay it off. 30 years. That's longer than most people keep their jobs, longer than most marriages last, and definitely longer than most people want to be reminded of that impulse purchase they made in their 20s. But here's what makes this even more infuriating. If you had invested that same money at 8% returns instead of paying interest on debt, it would have grown to over $50,000 in 30 years. So carrying that debt doesn't just cost you the interest payments, it costs you the wealth you could have built with that money. That's what economists call opportunity cost, and it's the hidden wealth destroyer that most people never calculate. Not all debt is created equal, and understanding this distinction is crucial for making smart financial decisions. There's good debt, and really bad debt. Good debt helps you build wealth or increase your earning potential over time. Your mortgage is usually considered good debt because real estate typically appreciates in value and the interest is often tax deductible. Student loans can be good debt if they lead to significantly higher earnings that more than offset the cost of the education. Bad debt is money borrowed to buy things that lose value over time or don't generate income. Car loans fall into this category because cars depreciate rapidly and you're paying interest on something that's worth less every month you own it. Credit card debt used for consumer purchases is bad debt because you're paying interest on things like clothes, restaurants, and gadgets that provide no financial return. Really bad debt is high-interest debt used for consumption or speculation. Payday loans, cash advances, and credit cards with interest rates above 20% are financial poison that can destroy your wealth-building potential for years. If you have this type of debt, eliminating it should be your absolute top financial priority, even before building an emergency fund. Here's the strategy that actually works for getting out of debt. And there are two main approaches, depending on your personality. The debt snowball method focuses on paying off your smallest balances first, regardless of interest rates. You make minimum payments on all debts and put any extra money toward the smallest balance. Once that's paid off, you take the money you were paying on that debt and add it to the payment on your next smallest balance. The debt avalanche method focuses on paying off your highest interest rate debts first, regardless of balance size. Mathematically, this saves you more money in interest charges over time, but it can be psychologically challenging if your highest interest debt also has a large balance. Both methods work, but the snowball often works better for people who need psychological wins to stay motivated. Paying off a small balance quickly provides a sense of accomplishment that can fuel your motivation to tackle larger debts. The avalanche makes more mathematical sense, but requires more discipline because progress can feel slower initially. Regardless of which method you choose, the key is consistency and avoiding new debt while you're paying off existing debt. This means living below your means and using cash or debit cards instead of credit cards for new purchases. It also means addressing the underlying behaviors that created the debt in the first place. Many people focus solely on the mechanics of debt repayment while ignoring the psychological factors that led to the debt accumulation. If you don't understand why you overspent in the first place, you'll likely repeat the same patterns even after paying off your current balances. Common reasons people accumulate debt include lifestyle inflation, where expenses automatically increase to match income, emotional spending, where purchases are driven by feelings rather than needs, lack of emergency funds that force people to use credit for unexpected expenses, and simply not tracking expenses carefully enough to notice gradual increases in spending. Student loans deserve special consideration because they often represent the largest debt burden for young adults, and the repayment options can be confusing. Federal student loans typically offer more flexible repayment options than private loans, including income-driven repayment plans that adjust your payments based on your earnings. If you have federal student loans and you're struggling with payments, don't ignore them or assume forbearance is your only option. Contact your loan servicer to explore income-driven repayment plans. These programs can reduce your monthly payments significantly, and some offer loan forgiveness after a certain number of qualifying payments. However, loan forgiveness programs have strict requirements and often require you to work in specific fields or for qualifying employers for extended periods. Make sure you understand all the requirements before counting on forgiveness, and keep detailed records of your payments and employment to prove your eligibility. Private student loans are less flexible, but might be eligible for refinancing at lower interest rates if your credit has improved since you originally borrowed the money. Refinancing can save you thousands of dollars in interest over the life of the loan, but be careful about refinancing federal loans with private lenders because you'll lose access to federal protections and repayment options. Now let's talk about something that most people find intimidating, but is actually the key to building real wealth over time: investing. The biggest misconception about investing is that it's either gambling or something only rich people do. In reality, not investing is actually the riskiest financial decision you can make because inflation will slowly destroy the purchasing power of money sitting in savings accounts. Here's something that's going to change how you think about investing forever. When you invest money, you're not gambling or speculating. You're buying tiny pieces of businesses that produce goods and services people actually want and need. When you buy shares in an index fund that tracks the total stock market, you own microscopic pieces of hundreds or thousands of companies. These companies employ millions of people who come to work every day trying to create value for customers and generate profits for shareholders. That's you, by the way. You become a shareholder, which means you own part of the productive capacity of the economy. As the economy grows over time, your investments typically grow with it. The magic happens through something called compound interest, which is basically earning returns not just on your original investment, but also on all the returns you've already earned. It starts slowly, but over time it becomes incredibly powerful. If you invest $100 per month starting at age 25 and earn an average return of 8% annually, by age 65, you'll have over $700,000. But if you wait until age 35 to start investing that same amount monthly, you'll only have about $300,000 by age 65. That 10-year delay cost you $400,000, even though you only invested $12,000 less in total. This is why time is your most valuable asset when it comes to investing, not the amount of money you start with. A 22-year-old investing $50 per month will likely end up wealthier than someone who starts investing $500 per month at age 40. For most people, especially those just starting out, the answer to where you should invest is surprisingly simple. Low-cost index funds that track broad market indexes are probably your best bet. These funds own tiny pieces of hundreds or thousands of companies, which spreads out your risk while capturing the overall growth of the economy. The S&P 500, which tracks the 500 largest companies in America, has averaged about 10% annual returns over the past several decades. That includes surviving the Great Depression, World War II, multiple recessions, the dot-com crash, the 2008 financial crisis, and the 2020 pandemic. The stock market goes up and down in the short term, sometimes dramatically, but over long periods it has consistently rewarded patient investors. Here's what most people get wrong about investing. They think they need to pick individual stocks, time the market, or find some secret strategy that beats everyone else. In reality, trying to outsmart the market usually leads to worse results than simply buying a broad index fund and holding it for decades. Even professional fund managers struggle to beat index funds consistently after accounting for their fees. Your investment strategy should be boring, not exciting. Exciting investment strategies are usually code for risky speculation that might make you rich quickly, but will more likely make you poor quickly. Boring strategies like consistently investing in diversified index funds while reinvesting all dividends have created more millionaires than any get-rich-quick scheme ever invented. But let's address the elephant in the room. What about market crashes? Yes, your investments will lose value sometimes, possibly a lot of value. During the 2008 financial crisis, the stock market dropped over 50% from its peak. During the early days of the 2020 pandemic, it dropped over 30% in just a few weeks. These declines are scary, but they're also temporary if you maintain a long-term perspective. Here's the counterintuitive truth about market crashes. They're actually good for young investors who are regularly adding money to their accounts. When prices drop, your regular contributions buy more shares at lower prices. When the market recovers, and it always has historically, those extra shares become incredibly valuable. It's like getting a discount on your future wealth. The key is having the right timeline and expectations. If you need your investment money within the next 5 years, the stock market isn't the right place for it. Stock market investing is for money you won't need for at least 10 years, preferably much longer. If your employer offers a retirement plan with matching contributions, that should be your first investment priority. Employer matching is literally free money, and passing it up is like declining a raise. Even if you can only contribute enough to get the full employer match, that's an immediate 100% return on your money before any investment growth. After maximizing your employer match, consider opening an individual retirement account, either traditional or Roth. Traditional IRAs give you a tax deduction now, but you'll pay taxes when you withdraw the money in retirement. Roth IRAs don't give you a current tax deduction, but all withdrawals in retirement are tax-free. For most young people, Roth accounts make more sense because you're likely in a lower tax bracket now than you'll be in retirement. The annual contribution limits for retirement accounts might seem low, but remember that you'll hopefully be investing for 30 or 40 years. Even small contributions can grow into substantial sums over time. Taxable investment accounts don't have contribution limits or withdrawal restrictions, making them perfect for goals that fall between short-term savings and retirement. Maybe you want to buy a house in 10 years, start a business in 15 years, or achieve financial independence before traditional retirement age. Taxable accounts give you the flexibility to access your money when opportunities arise. The most important factor in investment success isn't picking the perfect funds or timing the market perfectly. It's consistently investing money every month, regardless of what the market is doing. This strategy, called dollar cost averaging, automatically buys more shares when prices are low and fewer shares when prices are high. Over time, this smooths out the volatility and usually results in better returns than trying to time your investments. But let's be realistic about something. Investing in the stock market requires emotional discipline that many people simply don't have. When your account balance drops by 20 or 30%, which will happen multiple times during your investing career, you'll be tempted to sell everything and put it back in savings accounts. This is exactly the wrong thing to do, but it's what most people do because losing money feels terrible, even when it's temporary. Successful investors understand that volatility is the price you pay for higher long-term returns. They view market downturns as sales on future wealth rather than reasons to panic. This mindset takes practice to develop, but it's essential for long-term investment success. The people who get rich from investing aren't the ones who never experience losses. They're the ones who stay invested during the scary times because they understand that temporary setbacks are part of the process. Real estate often comes up in discussions about building wealth, and it can be a good investment, but it's not as simple as many people think. Your primary residence isn't really an investment in the traditional sense because it doesn't generate income, and you still need somewhere to live even if you sell it. Investment real estate, where you buy properties to rent to others, can generate excellent returns if you do it correctly. But being a landlord is essentially running a small business with all the challenges that entails. You'll deal with tenant problems, maintenance issues, vacancy periods, and significant upfront costs. Many people romanticize real estate investing without understanding the time commitment and headaches involved. Real estate investment trusts offer a way to invest in real estate without the hassles of direct ownership. REITs are companies that own and operate income-producing real estate, and they're required to distribute most of their profits to shareholders as dividends. The decision between buying and renting your home is one of the biggest financial choices you'll make, and it's not as straightforward as most people think. The traditional advice says renting is throwing money away while buying builds equity. But this oversimplifies a complex decision that depends on many factors specific to your situation. Home ownership can be a great wealth-building tool if you buy the right house at the right time in the right location and stay there long enough to offset the transaction costs. But home ownership also comes with significant costs beyond the mortgage payment that many first-time buyers underestimate. Property taxes, insurance, maintenance, repairs, and opportunity costs can add up to much more than many people expect. The break-even point for buying versus renting is usually somewhere between 5 and 7 years, depending on your local market conditions and the specific numbers involved. If you're planning to move within 5 years, renting probably makes more financial sense. If you're planning to stay put for a decade or more, buying often comes out ahead financially, while providing the stability and control that many people value. Your transportation choices represent another major financial decision that can either accelerate or destroy your wealth-building potential. The average American now pays over $700 per month for their car payment alone. When you add insurance, gas, maintenance, and repairs, transportation becomes the second largest expense category for most households. Here's some math that'll make you reconsider that shiny new car. A $700 monthly car payment invested at 8% returns instead becomes over $900,000 over 40 years. That luxury vehicle isn't just costing you $700 per month, it's potentially costing you nearly $1 million in retirement wealth. The best car buying strategy is purchasing reliable used vehicles with cash when possible. Let someone else take the massive depreciation hit during the first few years while you drive a perfectly functional vehicle that gets you from point A to point B without destroying your financial future. Now let's talk about something that feels impossibly far away, but is actually the most important financial goal you'll ever have. Retirement planning isn't just about having money when you're old, it's about having choices throughout your entire life. When you have substantial retirement savings, you gain the freedom to take career risks, pursue opportunities that might not pay well initially, or even retire early if that's your goal. The mathematics of retirement are both encouraging and terrifying. Encouraging because compound interest makes even modest savings grow into substantial wealth over decades. Terrifying because most Americans are woefully unprepared for retirement and don't realize it until it's too late to fix the problem easily. According to recent surveys, the median retirement savings balance for all Americans is just $87,000. Using the traditional 4% withdrawal rule, that provides $3,400 per year in retirement income, or about $290 per month. That's not a retirement plan, that's a recipe for working until you die. The general rule of thumb is that you'll need about 70 to 80% of your pre-retirement income to maintain your standard of living in retirement. If you're currently earning $60,000 per year, you'll need $42,000 to $48,000 annually in retirement income. With Social Security providing maybe $20,000 per year, you need to generate $22,000 to $28,000 annually from your retirement savings. Using the 4% rule, that means you need between $550,000 and $700,000 saved for retirement. That might sound impossible, but remember the power of compound interest and time. If you start investing $300 per month at age 25 and earn 8% annually, you'll have over $800,000 by age 65. Start at 35 and you'll have about $370,000. Start at 45 and you'll have only about $150,000. This is why retirement planning can't be something you'll get around to eventually. Every year you delay starting costs you tens of thousands of dollars in potential retirement wealth. The good news is that you don't need to figure out everything at once. Start with whatever you can afford, even if it's just $50 per month, and increase your contributions whenever possible. Your employer's retirement plan should be your first stop, especially if they offer matching contributions. If your employer matches 50% of contributions up to 6% of your salary, that's an immediate 50% return on your money before any investment growth. Not taking advantage of employer matching is like declining a raise, which makes about as much sense as using a $20 bill to light a cigarette. After maximizing your employer match, consider opening a Roth IRA if you're eligible. The contribution limits might seem small, but remember that all withdrawals in retirement will be tax-free, including decades of investment growth. For young people especially, paying taxes on contributions now in exchange for tax-free growth forever is usually a great deal. Target date funds make retirement investing simple for people who don't want to become investment experts. These funds automatically adjust their mix of stocks and bonds as you approach retirement, becoming more conservative over time. You literally just pick the fund closest to your expected retirement year and let it handle the rest. It's like autopilot for your retirement planning. But here's something that's going to completely change how you think about retirement. You're not just saving for when you're old and gray. You're saving for freedom and choices throughout your entire life. When you have substantial retirement savings, you have what's called screw you money. You can walk away from toxic jobs, take entrepreneurial risks, or pursue opportunities that might not pay well initially, but could lead to something amazing. This brings us to something that most people completely misunderstand about building wealth. They think it's about making more money, when in reality it's about keeping more money. You probably know people who earn six-figure salaries, but are somehow always broke. They drive expensive cars, live in fancy apartments, and eat at restaurants that charge $20 for a salad, but they have no savings whatsoever. Meanwhile, you might know someone who makes $40,000 a year but has managed to accumulate substantial savings by being intentional about their spending. The difference isn't income, it's mindset. And developing the right financial mindset is probably more valuable than any specific strategy or tactic. The wealthy understand something that broke people don't. Every dollar has the potential to become multiple dollars through compound growth. When you buy that expensive coffee every morning, you're not just spending $4. You're giving up the $40 that $4 could become over 10 years if invested properly. This doesn't mean you should never enjoy a good cup of coffee, but it means you should understand the real cost of your choices. Here's where most people get tripped up by lifestyle inflation. As soon as they start earning more money, they immediately start spending more money. They upgrade their apartment, buy a fancier car, eat at more expensive restaurants. Their expenses rise to meet their income, which means they never actually get ahead. They're just running faster on the same treadmill. But when you understand wealth-building principles, every raise becomes an opportunity to accelerate your financial progress. Instead of upgrading your lifestyle every time your income increases, you maintain your current standard of living and invest the difference. This is how ordinary people with ordinary incomes build extraordinary wealth over time. Let me share something that might sound crazy, but could change your entire financial trajectory. What if I told you that the difference between being financially comfortable and being financially stressed often comes down to just a few $100s per month? Most people think they need massive income increases to improve their financial situation, but the reality is much simpler than that. If you can find a way to reduce your expenses by $300 per month, or increase your income by $300 per month, and invest that difference consistently, you'll have over $400,000 in 30 years, assuming 8% returns. $400,000. That's the difference between financial security and financial stress, and it all starts with finding $300 per month. Where do you find $300 per month? It's hiding in plain sight in your current spending habits. That gym membership you never use, the subscription services you forgot about, the convenience purchases that seem harmless individually, but add up to serious money over time. Maybe it's eating out less frequently, buying generic brands instead of name brands, or finding a cheaper phone plan. Or maybe it's increasing your income through a side hustle, asking for a raise at work, or developing skills that make you more valuable in the job market. The specific tactics matter less than understanding that small changes consistently applied create massive results over time. This is where the psychology of money becomes absolutely crucial. Most people know what they should do financially, but they don't do it because they lack the mental framework to stick with boring strategies for extended periods. Building wealth isn't exciting or glamorous. It's about making smart decisions day after day, month after month, year after year, even when you don't feel like it. The people who successfully build wealth develop what I call immunity to lifestyle inflation. They understand the difference between wants and needs. They've trained themselves to find satisfaction in progress toward their goals rather than in accumulating stuff that loses value. They've learned to delay gratification, which is probably the single most valuable financial skill anyone can develop. Here's something that might surprise you about wealthy people. They're not constantly thinking about money, but they have systems in place that automatically direct their money toward wealth-building activities. They've automated their savings, automated their investments, and automated their bill payments. Money moves from their paycheck to appropriate accounts without them having to think about it or rely on willpower. This automation is crucial because willpower is a finite resource that gets depleted throughout the day. If you have to rely on motivation and discipline to make good financial decisions, you'll eventually fail because everyone has days when they don't feel motivated or disciplined. But if your wealth building happens automatically, it continues working even when you're tired, stressed, or distracted. Set up automatic transfers from your checking account to your emergency fund, your retirement accounts, and your other savings goals. Schedule automatic bill payments so you never have late fees. Use automatic investment plans that buy shares regardless of what the market is doing. The goal is to make saving and investing as effortless as possible while making spending require conscious decisions. Now let's talk about something that most financial education completely ignores, but is absolutely essential for long-term success: how to handle financial setbacks and mistakes. Because you're going to make mistakes. Everyone does. You'll buy things you regret, make investment decisions that don't work out, or have unexpected expenses that derail your plans temporarily. The difference between people who build wealth and those who don't isn't that wealthy people never make financial mistakes. It's that they don't let mistakes derail their entire financial plan. They learn from their errors, adjust their strategies, and get back on track as quickly as possible. Financial setbacks are part of the process, not evidence that you're failing or that wealth building doesn't work. Your car will need major repairs at the worst possible time. You'll face medical expenses that insurance doesn't cover. You might lose your job or have your hours reduced. These things happen to everyone, and they don't mean you should abandon your long-term financial goals. This is why having multiple financial goals with different time horizons is so important. If an emergency forces you to pause your retirement contributions for a few months while you rebuild your emergency fund, that's not a disaster. It's just a temporary adjustment that doesn't affect your long-term trajectory, as long as you get back on track once the crisis passes. The key is building flexibility into your financial plan so it can bend without breaking. Don't create budgets that are so tight they fall apart the moment anything unexpected happens. Don't set savings goals that are so aggressive they're impossible to maintain during challenging periods. Better to make steady progress that you can sustain than to sprint for a few months and then give up entirely. Here's something that's going to sound counterintuitive, but it's absolutely crucial for your financial success. You need to learn to be comfortable with being uncomfortable. Building wealth requires doing things that feel wrong to people who haven't developed financial discipline. It feels wrong to drive a reliable used car when all your friends have new vehicles with monthly payments. It feels wrong to live in a modest apartment when you could qualify for a much larger mortgage. It feels wrong to pack lunch instead of eating out with coworkers every day. But these decisions that feel uncomfortable in the moment are exactly what create financial freedom in the long run. The people around you will question your choices. They'll ask why you're being so cheap when you could afford to spend more. They might even make fun of your frugal habits, or suggest that you're missing out on life by being so focused on the future. This social pressure is one of the biggest obstacles to building wealth because humans are social creatures who want to fit in with their peer group. But here's what they don't understand. You're not depriving yourself of a good life. You're buying yourself a better life. Every dollar you don't spend on impressing other people is a dollar that can work for your future self. Every monthly payment you avoid is money that can be invested to generate passive income. Every financial sacrifice you make today expands your options tomorrow. The temporarily uncomfortable feeling of living below your means is nothing compared to the permanently comfortable feeling of financial security. When you have substantial savings and investments, you sleep better at night. You're less stressed about work because you're not completely dependent on your paycheck. You have more confidence in your relationships because you're not constantly worried about money. Most importantly, you have choices. You can take calculated risks that broke people simply can't afford to take. You can invest in yourself through education or training that might not pay off immediately, but could transform your earning potential. You can start a business, change careers, or even take time off to care for family members without worrying about financial disaster. This is what real wealth looks like. It's not about showing off or impressing anyone. It's about having options and feeling secure regardless of what life throws at you. The people driving expensive cars and living in fancy houses might look successful from the outside, but if they're living paycheck to paycheck with massive monthly payments, they're actually more financially vulnerable than someone earning half as much who has substantial savings. Understanding this distinction between looking wealthy and being wealthy is crucial because our culture constantly sends messages that equate consumption with success. Social media makes it seem like everyone else is living lavish lifestyles while you're stuck being responsible with your money. But what you're not seeing are the credit card statements, the stress levels, and the complete lack of financial security that often hide behind those impressive-looking lifestyles. The truly wealthy understand that building net worth requires a completely different mindset than earning high income. It requires thinking long-term instead of short-term, prioritizing assets over liabilities, and understanding that delayed gratification is the price of admission to financial independence. Here's your homework assignment, and I want you to actually do this, not just think about doing it. Tonight, before you go to bed, calculate your current net worth using the method I described earlier. Write down that number, along with today's date. Then calculate your monthly cash flow by tracking every dollar that comes in and goes out for the next 30 days. Next, set up automatic transfers to start building your emergency fund, even if you can only afford $25 per week initially. If your employer offers retirement plan matching, sign up tomorrow and contribute at least enough to get the full match. If you have high-interest debt, create a plan to pay it off using either the snowball or avalanche method. These aren't suggestions or things to consider someday. These are the foundational steps that separate people who build wealth from people who spend their entire lives struggling with money. The information gap that's been holding you back no longer exists. You now understand more about personal finance than most adults ever learn. The only question remaining is whether you'll actually implement these strategies or just file them away as interesting information you might use someday. Because here's the brutal truth about financial education. Knowledge without action is worthless. You can watch every financial video on YouTube, read every book about money, and attend every seminar about wealth building, but none of it matters if you don't actually change your behavior. The difference between your current financial situation and where you want to be isn't more information. It's the decision to start taking action today, even if those actions seem small and insignificant. Every wealthy person started exactly where you are right now, with the decision to prioritize their future self over their current impulses. Your financial future isn't determined by your current income, your family background, or your past mistakes. It's determined by what you do next. The compound interest clock started ticking the moment you were born, and every day you delay taking action is a day you can never get back. But every day you choose to build wealth instead of just earning money is a day that moves you closer to complete financial freedom. The choice is yours. You can continue doing what you've always done and get the same results you've always gotten. Or you can implement these strategies and join the small percentage of people who actually achieve financial independence. The tools are in your hands. The knowledge is in your head. The only thing missing is the decision to start building the financial life you actually want instead of just dreaming about it. What you do in the next 24 hours will reveal whether this video was just entertainment or the moment everything changed for you financially. Your future self is counting on the decision you make today. The reality is that most people never implement anything they learn about money, and I know exactly why. It's not because they don't understand the concepts. It's because they get overwhelmed by trying to do everything at once and end up doing nothing at all. So let me give you a different approach that actually works for real people, living real lives. Pick one thing, just one. Maybe it's setting up that automatic $25 weekly transfer to your emergency fund. Maybe it's calling your credit card company to negotiate a lower interest rate. Maybe it's signing up for your employer's retirement plan tomorrow morning. Whatever you choose, make it so small that you can't talk yourself out of it. Here's why this matters more than you think. Success in personal finance isn't about making perfect decisions. It's about building momentum through small wins that compound over time. When you successfully stick to one tiny financial habit for 30 days, something interesting happens in your brain. You start seeing yourself as someone who follows through on financial commitments. That identity shift is more valuable than the actual money involved. Once that first habit becomes automatic, you add another small change, then another. Before you know it, you're living a completely different financial life. But it happened so gradually that it never felt overwhelming or impossible. This is how ordinary people build extraordinary wealth without feeling like they're sacrificing everything they enjoy. But here's something that's going to challenge everything you think you know about getting rich. The biggest obstacle to building wealth isn't your income level, your education, or your family background. It's your relationship with time. Most people treat time like it's infinite when it comes to money decisions, but they treat money like it's infinite when it comes to time decisions. They'll spend 2 hours researching which streaming service to cancel to save $15 per month, but they won't spend 2 hours learning about compound interest that could save them $15,000 over their lifetime. They'll drive across town to save $20 on groceries, but they won't invest 20 minutes setting up automatic retirement contributions that could be worth $20,000 in retirement. The wealthy think about time completely differently. They understand that time is their most valuable asset because it can't be replaced, earned back, or borrowed against. Every day you wait to start investing is a day you can never recover. Every month you spend paying interest on debt instead of earning returns on investments is a month that's gone forever. So there you have it, 50 minutes of financial education that should have been taught in every classroom, but somehow never made it into any curriculum. You now know more about building wealth than most people learn in their entire lives. The emergency fund that protects you from disaster, the debt strategies that actually work, the investing principles that create millionaires, and most importantly, the mindset shifts that separate those who build wealth from those who just earn money. But here's the final truth that matters more than everything else we've covered. Your financial future will be determined not by what you learn today, but by what you do tomorrow. The compound interest clock is already ticking, and every single day you delay is a day you can never get back. Start now. Start small. But for the love of your future self, just start.